beautiful humans, and welcome to S.P.L.I.F.F with your host, Vaughn. So, S.P.L.I.F.F stands for Spiritual Perceptions of Life Interconnections and Fuckery with Fawn. Yeah, that's a mouthful. The reason I chose that name is because, sometimes you just need a good spliff. Helps you keep from jumping off cliffs. A little dark humor there. But I'm going to break that down. So we got spiritual perceptions of life interconnections. And what that means to me as a spiritual person, I move through life and I think about my actions and my choices in a very spiritual aspect. And by that, I mean, even something as simple as meeting someone at the grocery store who feels the need to talk to me about their life and just like open up fully. Some people would be in that situation and be like, oh, what a weirdo, what a creep. But for me, I generally feel like if someone feels that need to come up to me and tell me their life story, they're looking for a space to be heard, and they're looking for guidance and teachings, as I believe that is my purpose. My purpose on this earth is to teach and guide, hence why I started this podcast. And so it's very incorporated into my life. I wouldn't say I make every decision and every choice off of my spirituality, but it's definitely a check-in for me. If I'm gonna move out of state, I will ask my spirit guides to show me signs, and that for me they usually come through animals, sometimes like angel numbers, but it's usually animal sightings, specifically hawks for me, as that is one of my spirit animals. And just a quick little brief on my spiritual beliefs. I practice a variety of like things that make sense to me and group them into what I call my spirituality. On my father's side, he taught me Native American spirituality. He is Mexican American and part of the Dene tribe, which is commonly known as Navajo. And on my mother's side, there wasn't really much religion or any teachings. They're Irish and redheads with freckles, and that's why I have more of a Caucasian appearance, whereas my father looks very Mexican American, very native, with that mixture in there. And so I took a lot from him teaching me. He didn't come around my life until about 14 to teach those things. And as I got into college, I discovered a little bit more beliefs, a little bit of Wiccan, a little bit of Hindu. And I just kind of combined it to what makes the most sense to me, and I incorporate that in my daily choices and just existing. If you're looking for a place to be able to relate or understand how moving through life as a spiritual and emotionally aware person can be absolute fuckery, or if you want to be more in touch with your emotions and your spirituality and how to grow that, this is the podcast for you. Through personal experiences and education and interactions with humans, we share our perception and rawness on how to move through life while being connected to the spirit realm. That's what we're going to do here. And our topics that I'm going to talk about by myself or with guests, I will be bringing guests, friends, family, specialists, are going to fall along these following, but it's not going to be limited to. Definitely, of course, spirituality. We're going to talk about therapy and therapeutic approaches to life and how important that is to a spiritual person. So, really big on believing mind, body, and spirit. So we're going to be talking about the mind and the therapy and the emotions. And we're going to be talking about the body and the physical health. And we're going to be talking about what the spirit needs and how we struggle in today's world meeting those needs. as a very corporate based and greedy and very negative world that we live in, being a spiritual person can be really hard. And that is what we're talking about. Some of the other things we're going to discuss is ghost, all the spooky ooky. So if you don't believe in ghosts, that's okay. Or any of the paranormal. Maybe you'll find something in this podcast on the therapeutic side that you want to hear. But this is a space for any and all and everything that I've experienced, as well as the humans in my life. We're going to talk about conspiracy theories, because what if they're not really conspiracy theories? What if it really is a message from the spirit realm? And that's going to be a fun, exciting episode. I can't wait for that one. We're going to talk about real world problems, emotional awareness, traumatic experiences, and how to get through them. And of course, I will always give a trigger warning. We don't want to add to all the extra emotions we already go through with our traumas. We're going to talk about women's health, social norms, and the weight they entail for all genders. It's going to be really fun and exciting, and I'm glad that you found this podcast, because something in you told you that you might find something that you need to hear or learn from on this too. On some of the episodes, I will be giving the opportunity for listeners to email in topics or questions that they have, and being able to respond to them. So it's going to be a very interactive podcast as well. And I'm so excited to finally feel like I can do this. I have been called to do a podcast since college, and I graduated college in 2019. Even though my degree says 2020, I was a year late turning in the papers. Gotta love procrastination times spirituality times trauma, So, yeah, I just hope that you find peace in this podcast, or something that you really connect to. What I want to dive into for this introduction episode is my story of how I discovered spirituality. And it's weird, and it's going to be kind of all over the place. I'm really bad at remembering specific ages and times, or events happening boom, 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 but rather bits and pieces. There'll be a little bit of a discussion of some of the trauma that I went through that kind of influenced or pushed me into the spiritual side. So if that's going to be something that's overwhelming for you, you might want to take a step back. We'll be talking about the death, or the my stepfather passed away, and what that initiated for my spirituality. So, yeah. Everyone has a story of how they got into their spirituality, or even just their religion. I don't like the term religion for what I believe in, because religion, I think, is very associated with all these rules and regulations, and very structured. And I think that for me personally, and a lot of the people in my life, our spirituality is supposed to be very self-guided, very one day at a time. And I do believe that the Creator sends us messages, but they're for us to interpret and for us to develop and choose which path we're going to walk on, for sure. So when I was younger, my stepdad, he passed away of a heart attack at 36. And I was roughly around the age of 10. And I just remember, I honestly remember the whole experience. And it doesn't really get any easier to talk about, even though I can talk about it and I don't find myself filled with tears. It's every time that we talk about trauma, we are reliving that experience. And in some ways that can be healing, and in some ways you can get definitely stuck in a cycle of never moving past that. he definitely took the place of my biological father. My dad wasn't around when I was younger for many reasons, and we'll talk about that in another episode. But I really just want to highlight what that step was for me to become pushed into the spirituality and not really even understand it. So we, watched my mom, we as in me and my brother. He's 2 years older than me. So we woke up to my mom frantically crying and yelling for us to call 911. And she tried her hardest to not involve us, and she did the best she could. And it took forever for the ambulance to get there. I remember all that. But really the highlight of this part of the story is that when we got to the hospital, we were sitting in this little cornered in room. To this day, I have never seen a room that was so unwelcoming. And we were almost boxed in. It was strange. There was glass and we could see through in the ER, and it was a lot. And my mom was there, my brother, my grandma, and my aunt. And of course, they're all very hysterical, as makes sense, My mom felt like that was her soulmate. So it makes a lot of sense that they weren't able to control their emotions in front of me and my brother. And we didn't really even understand what was going on. Yeah, we could see that something was wrong and we knew that. But anyways, the doctor came in and they told us that he was no longer with us. And I just remember my mom collapsing and crying and screaming and everyone saying why God? And I just stood there so confused. I was so confused because not only did my little young brain not compute what just happened, but I saw his spirit standing right there. Ooh, now I'm going to get emotional. Standing right there through the glass next to the doctor who's talking. And I just remember being so confused, why is everyone saying that he's not here when he's right here? And not even being able to connect, what that meant. And I remember bringing it up to my mom, and she's not a spiritual person, and that's okay. And so she just, completely shut it down. And it was just, at that age, I had no one around to explain what was going on. And then from then on, I constantly saw human spirits or very scary demonic creatures. And throughout a lot of my life, I dealt with my mom saying not to tell people that because that's crazy, that that's what schizophrenia is. Or I had partners in my life who were very you need to be in a hospital. Seeing that stuff isn't normal. And it wasn't until my dad came back around in my life at the age of, it was around the age of 14. And I started asking him because I needed someone to explain what was going on. And I would always hear and see these things, and sometimes they would physically touch me. And the people I was around, I had this friend at the time, that was wild. Kind of stuff I would experience at this person's house, but we'll talk about that in a different podcast when we get into the ghosts and things. And so I brought this up to my dad, and my dad's this is normal. Everyone in our family is meant to help spirits and help people. So I was okay, well, can you explain? And he, at the time, was a pretty heavy drinker, definitely an alcoholic, and he had a very interesting way of teaching spirituality. And I think he still kind of holds to that a little bit today, although he's definitely healed. He's not as much of as a drinker and all that. But he was well, go watch this movie, Constantine. And I was like the Marvel character? Okay. So I went and watched Constantine. And I don't know if you guys have seen it. If you haven't, maybe you should. It's a very interesting perspective. He was like, this is what I was taught, brought up believing, but very Hollywood. It's not as like all that extra. But yes, that people can get possessed by spirits, and yes, there's people who are gifted and can see and can help exercise them and help them understand and all this stuff. And that we as a family, like our family is supposed to do that. And again, I was not accepted for this on one side of my family, and I definitely wasn't accepted for this in high school. And it wasn't really until college that I found people that understood, and that made me definitely reassured and helped me feel like I wasn't crazy. And I'm sure that there's still going to be people out there that are going to watch this and call me crazy, and that's okay. I do not feel that I'm crazy. I think that, being normal is crazy, and being crazy is normal. So, but I watched the movie, and then my dad was like, okay, what did you take from that? And I was like, well, if this is really what is happening, why is it that I can see spirits? Like, how do I help them? I don't know what to do. This is kind of like all new. This is wild and crazy. And my dad was very like, it was wild. He goes, come here. And I was like, okay. And he calls me mija, which is Spanish for like baby or baby girl or daughter, like where he grew up. That's just like all my tias and all of them, they call me mija. So he's like, mija, come here. And I was like, okay. And he's like, look into my eye. And I was like, okay, this is weird. What am I looking at? And he's like, what do you see? And like, I'm just like staring into my dad's eye, and kind of at the age of 14, it's like uncomfortable and weird and awkward. And then I see it. I see how do I even word this? I'm a firm believer after this that our eyes are the gateway to our soul. And so my dad opened his aura and showed me his soul, along with like the really scary dark energies that he has with him, the demons. He's named his demon as his like alternate personality, kind of, but not. It's interesting. My father is a very interesting character that I will discuss in further podcast episodes. But I saw it, and I kind of like got scared, and I took a deep breath and like stepped back. And I was like, what was that? And he's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have showed you that. Now all the doors are going to be open. And I was like, what doors? And he's like, you'll see. So that night I went to bed, at the age of 14, and I could not sleep because all I could hear was footsteps and whispers, and like things were like touching like my hands and my shoulders and like playing with my hair, and I could hear growls and all this stuff. And every time I closed my eyes, I would just see all these really scary like demonic spirits just full on throwing themselves into my presence, because all of my spiritual doors were opened all at once. And I actually talked to my dad about this later down the line, and he was like, yeah, it was probably not the best way to do it, but it's definitely a way to like sink or swim and see if you're capable. And that's my dad's like life motto, sink or swim. That has all kinds of traumas within it to unpack as well. But it's a way to do it, and some people can and some people can't. So that went on for about a month. I got no sleep. I'm a teenager dealing with all my hormones and emotions, and I didn't have the best like parental upbringing. I did not have a normal upbringing at all. So I had all this stuff going on. Plus I was not able to sleep. Plus I was dealing with all these like whispers and things, and I thought I was losing my mind. I was ready to just like, that was it. I was ready to just be done with life because I was so overwhelmed. So I go to my dad and I'm like, all right, I need this to stop. Can you make this stop? I'm going crazy. Like, there's something wrong with me. And he's like, there's nothing wrong with you. but we can stop it. We can make it stop. I can help you turn off your spirituality, but you may never be able to turn it back on. And I was like, what? What does that even mean? Like, are we in an anime? Are we in a movie? You can just flip a switch for my spirituality. It didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And, even just telling this story, it still doesn't, like, my brain still can't compute, right? Because I'm battling that logic versus that spiritual side. Again, the whole purpose of this podcast is to talk about being a spiritual person and having to face the reality of the life that we live in, the fuckery, right? So I was like, no, Dad, I can't give it up. Like, I know that this is real and this is what I'm supposed to do, but it's too much and I need to figure out how to deal with it. And he goes, you can do it, mija. Follow your heart, mija. That was his phrase for my life. Follow your heart, mija. And I was like, what? Why are you not, like, helping me? And he's like, because you can do it. You can do it. So I took that and I was like, well, I'm going to have to close these doors because I can't do this no more. I can't be being kept up and just dealing with all that. So I went back to my room and just kind of really sat and thought about what that means. And I just, like, remember I was, like, kind of like my first time, like, really meditating. And, like, I channeled and called on the Great Spirit and asked for guidance and help in understanding what I'm going through and how to process and deal with that and close those doors so that I can actually help. And it was like I had the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders. I could feel just such a warm presence coming over my body. And I was like, yeah, I got this now. And that's kind of like the root of how I got brought into my spirituality. I did not have a normal childhood. And I say that, like, the biggest thing is losing my stepfather, but I do also remember, like, I always thought they were imaginary friends, right, when I was a kid, but it really wasn't until my stepfather passed away that they became really, really potent and visual. Like, what do you mean? This none of this makes sense. And so for me, it's kind of always been like full send. You're meant to just move through life and be this person to spiritually guide. And at the age of 17, my father told me that my purpose is to be a Shaw woman. And with that means not only do I help spirits cross from this world to the other, but I also will teach and guide every human that I come into contact with. And it's not going to be an easy life, and it's at times going to feel lonely, and at times I'm going to be the happiest person in the world, and then at times I'm going to be the most depressed and dark and down human that doesn't want to live anymore. And I faced so much as a child and as an adult, and I can't wait to unpack, like, my childhood and really share that with the listeners, with all of you guys, and hope that, like, one of you, if just one of you, can relate or be like, wow, like, I wasn't the only one. That's my goal here, is to create a safe place to talk about trauma, to talk about spirituality with trauma and being traumatized from spirituality. That's a whole thing in itself. And I'm definitely going to have an episode where I talk about one of my most traumatizing romantic relationships and how that traumatized me in a spiritual way too. And I shied away from spirituality for a long time. But I hope you enjoyed this intro episode to S.P.L.I.F.F. And I appreciate every one of you that have given this listen and that are here with me. And I look forward to having all these extra guests on the show and talking about what it means to be a spiritual person in this world and what we have to face in doing that. And I just want you to know that every person out there And if you're giving this a listen, this goes to you. Maybe you have a friend, but we all are creatures of love, and we're all connected through the universe and through each other, whether you want to call it stardust or the deep down spirit. But we're here with each other to help each other learn and grow and become the best versions of ourselves that we possibly can. And I want you to know that you are beautiful, you are loved, you are human. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, amazing experience to be human on this earth and to go through these things and to be able to share them with everyone. So, yeah, I'm going to have some interactive podcast episodes where I'm going to have you guys send in through email, send in some topics or questions that you want answered with, like, you know, what it means to be spiritual, or even just like some of the therapeutic stuff that we're going to talk about. And I'd like to get to a point where I'll start doing live streams as well, so that it can be more like present. You don't have to wait for that conversation, but it might be a minute before I get there. So thank you for tuning in, and I really hope that any part of this podcast can reach your spirit and help you take the next step in life of becoming the best you possible. So thank you for joining in. We will see you next time. Bye.